All right, next up we've got Order of the Phoenix, or one good way to phrase it, Harry Potter in the year that everyone actually got a haircut.
Yeah. Oh Christ. Yes, they did.
Now,
Oh
as far
yeah.
as Daniel Radcliffe, I think he had to get a cut because he was starring in Equus in London, that was happening in between films.
Yeah. I forgot to mention that when we were talking about Goblet of Fire was the hair. I mean, that was one thing I forgot to mention. That hair. And just him and Ron. It's crazy. Like I get what they were going for because. Like I know, I had a lot of friends. I was a simple guy. I just had the same haircut through high school, middle school, and high school. But I had friends who tried to grow out mustaches. Obviously, it looked terrible. I had friends who were growing out their hair too long, and it looked terrible. I had friends who just it was rebellious time, and it was just like, hey, like let's do something weird. So I feel like a lot of the kids essentially that was what they were showing, that it's around that middle school time where tensions are high, emotions are going crazy, testosterone, hormones, all that jazz. So it makes sense that the young guys are going to kind of do something a little funky with their hair. But I'm so glad that they all. And honestly, they had to manicure them a bit because this is the movie that begins sort of the. We're in adult territory now, and we can't have moppy headed kids going up against the equivalent of the Third Reich in the Harry
Yeah.
Potter universe. So, I mean, even though Daniel definitely needed to do it so that he could show all the goods on stage in Equus. Regardless of whether he had to do that or not, he had to cut that hair. That hair had to get cut no matter what. So I'm just glad that they did it.
Although in the books, Harry is always depicted as having long
Long
hair,
hair.
like that kind of just grows all over. But
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. Yeah, the drawings always have him with the long hair, which is funny because it's like I don't know. I feel like a guy at some point would want to do something different with his hair, but I don't know. I'm not Harry Potter.
but as far as the movie's concerned, it's definitely a change in tone. This is the first one that's directed by David Yates now, and
Who
it's
keeps
probably
going and going and going?
yeah, it's probably the quickest that the story just jumps straight to the action. We get a freaking Dementor attack in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, first off, on Yates, I felt like I was kind of deriding him a little bit. I think that I think he's tremendous, and he really created kinship with Harry Potter. I feel as though he did a great job on this series, closing it out, and I think that it was smart from this one onward for there to be, pardon me, one director, because from this film to the end, it's really one long, continuous story at this point. There are individualistic charms to each of the next four films, but they really are one straight narrative. So having one director creates a synchronicity, whereas the first four have each their own charm, although
Yeah.
like their own identity. I think that Yates coming back for Beasts was kind of similar to Martin Campbell coming back for Casino Royale and Bond, and I think he
Mm.
kicked off that universe well. And he needed to retire from Harry Potter at that moment. I'm not to go. I'm not going to go off on a tangent. Although I can say this to tie those together. The great thing about Order of the Phoenix is this is the fifth film, so we have had four films to spend with these characters. A lot of movies, by the third movie, by the second movie, they're at war, which I think sometimes isn't earned. But this, we had a great build-up, and this is a great time to that the troops are getting rallied, and the chessboard is,
Yeah.
is slowly being set. Whereas when you get to Crimes of Grindelwald, we really just settled with these characters in the first film, and we're already going into the ultimate final war. It's the equivalent of after Sorcerer's Stone was Half Blood Prince. It's like whoa, whoa, calm
Yeah.
down just a little bit. But yeah,
And
mhm.
I know we're not getting into Fantastic Beasts fully,
Oh no, yeah.
I just feel like can't those movies just be about the beasts and not this parallel war with Grindelwald and everything with that?
Yeah, yeah. I think they would have been smart if the first two or three or individual adventures that he was going off on with Jacob around the world, and kind of Indiana Jones meets Harry Potter, but slowly
Yeah.
in the background, kind of what the first four films did in Harry Potter. You give each film its own identity, its own fun, but in the background lurks this main plot that keeps getting thicker and thicker with each movie. Each one at some point, each one turns out has informed the overarching story, but you could watch any of those first four films out of context and still enjoy them on their own
Yeah.
merits. Whereas, and that's what they needed to do with Beasts, but I think that I feel like lately they're giving into fan fiction a bit too much. And listen, there's some great fan. If I read Crimes of Grindelwald as fan fiction, I would have been like, I wouldn't make this into a film. But I'll tell you, I mean, this is a lot of fun. It's interesting, But I would never sign off on it being canon. But that was the film. But anyway, let's talk about a movie I like. This often is my favorite one. Sometimes it switches, but with Half Blood Prince. But this one is usually my favorite when someone kind of does gun to the head. What's your favorite?
I think it's better at trimming down the fat because this is based on the longest
That's a
uh,
big ass book.
yeah, the longest book. It's 870 pages in the North American print,
Yeah,
but
those books can build a brownstone.
yeah, and I feel like that movie was, or that book, sorry, was needlessly long, and I felt like the movie kind of condensed things a lot more, and
Which I mean,
it's
that's what a
interesting.
film does.
Yeah, and it's interesting that this is the only movie to not be written by Steve Kloves. Instead, it's Michael Goldenberg.
Hmm. Yeah, you can see a change in style definitely.
And what you were saying before, how each of the last four movies are a very distinct style, and yeah, it basically goes from like a political thriller of sorts, and then Half Blood Prince is sort of a double tiered mystery, and then Deathly Hallows goes from like road trip to a war movie, basically.
Yeah, exactly right. Um, the plot beats of the last four films help the big final arc to breathe. Instead of shoehorning everything into that very final film, which I mean, it's a lot of series tend to do. Um, even though the last four are all by one director, he still manages to find a great way to differentiate them. Because this is sort of the last one where it really feels like we're at school. Because Half Blood Prince is so dark and everyone's sort of in shadows and everyone's sort of plotting in that movie, and I don't really
Yeah.
feel like Hogwarts is Hogwarts anymore by that time. In this film, it still does feel like Hogwarts, except it's under this sort of dictatorship of trying to control the flow of information and keep people from knowing the truth and keeping the kids in line and all that. It's kind of it's the beginning of the end for Hogwarts essentially, where we're beginning to see its identity slowly getting drained out of it. And that's the great thing about these next four is it breaks down the infrastructure that the four films previous had set up perfectly. The Ministry first is corrupt and inept, and eventually is completely infiltrated.
Yeah.
And the school ends up first at the mercy of politics, and then ultimately, it's at the mercy of spies for Voldemort, and then
Yeah.
in the continuity of the information that they're given when Snape is in control. Obviously, it's a dictatorship completely. So this is the beginning where all the color starts to slowly get zapped out of it. By the time we get to Deathly Hallows Part One, it's a very gray and monochrome. It looks like a war film. Um,
Yeah.
Man, do they make you feel the next few movies?
But what this story does, it introduces some of the most poignant characters for the rest of the way, including everyone's most favorite character in this entire
Oh
franchise,
yeah,
Dolores Umbridge,
oh yeah. I'm telling you,
played wonderfully by Imelda Staunton.
I'm telling you, I don't know why Warner Brothers didn't even try and get her an Academy Award nomination because this woman seamlessly, flawlessly created one of the most hateable characters ever to grace a film screen. It's she's just universally hated, but obviously what we mean is that she is such a damn good actress that she really
Yeah.
makes you want to reach through the screen and wring her goddamn neck. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you hate that smile, you hate that simpering laugh,
Oh
you
yeah.
hate her condescending attitude.
Oh, everything. Yeah, the ultimate hypocrisy. You know, she literally is a microcosm for corrupt education or politics. Everything is pink and everything is smiley and everything is conservative. And I don't mean that political party. I mean just conservative in nature. And of course, underneath is really just a tyrant who uses pleasantries to control people. And she's a sycophant, as we learn further, later on in the series. Uh, but the thing is, she gives this movie such a great weight um, because at this point she's not a Death Eater. She has no belief system, and she still doesn't later. But she really is just using the Ministry to to gain her success and power. But ironically, she is kind of the central antagonist to this movie, but she has no connection to Voldemort, which is really an interesting turn. Because at this
Yeah,
point, pretty much all of the villains in the series have been servants of Voldemort, if not Voldemort himself. Whereas now, one of the biggest issues that Harry and the team faces in this movie, and it goes from fun and games to she starts torturing him, and that's not funny. I think that's one great unique element of this movie is it's really I think the one and only time where one of the villains is has no connection to Death Eaters at this point in time. Has no connection whatsoever.
something I want to bring up is that there's a point in the middle of the movie when Sirius is telling Harry, the world isn't split up into good people
Death Eaters.
and Death Eaters. Now, in the book, he's actually referring to Umbridge in this sense.
It's interesting. Huh.
Yeah, yeah. So they like kind of change the context overall, which yeah, it probably would have felt a little on the nose. I mean, it's not outright said what you were saying, but
Yeah.
you still kind of get the idea.
Yeah, yeah. That's you see, and that's the thing. There's elements of the books that I have that just completely go over my head. But I mean, at the end of the day, she does share the similar ideology to them. It's basically all about power, control, survival of the fittest. Stay in line, and she definitely has her own bigotry. There's no way she doesn't. So
Yeah.
she definitely has that awful mindset that Harry and the teams continually fight against because it's the classic. The younger generation has to kind of clean up the mess of the previous generation, and has to deal with that type of it's weird to say patriarchy because she's a woman, but in with that type of old way of thinking and kind of an antiquated mindset and way of governing.
Okay, Boomer, right?
Yeah, that's essentially this movie, Harry Potter and the OK Boomer, the Order of the OK Boomer.
But someone else who truly is a beloved character who gets introduced here is Luna Lovegood.
Oh yeah, she's one of those characters who I think ends up on most people's favorite lists,
Yeah.
and with good reason. She's such a breath of fresh air because everybody is, their characters are very heightened, and even Harry, who obviously is starting to show the Voldemort inside of him in this movie, and to
Yeah.
see a very nice counterbalance of just someone so soft spoken and sweet and very much an individualistic person. She is the type of individual who doesn't realize that she's an individual. Like she doesn't really consider herself. She says that she is considered strange, but it's just kind of day to day for her, and that's the charm of the character. She's very she makes no apologies. She just is who she is, and she gets some of the great laughs in the movie too. In all the movies,
Yeah, yeah, just how blunt she is about a lot of things, but she's never like
she's never mean.
mean about it. No, and I was reading something the other day how people always toss around brutal honesty. It's like, can't it just be understanding, calm, rational honesty?
No, it's exactly right. There is a difference with, oh, I just tell it like it is. That's usually said by someone who said it in a rude and nasty way. Whereas there are ways to tell someone very, very bluntly, but without any sort of bias or vitriol. And also the great thing about her is that she finds compliments in uh, in moments that otherwise wouldn't call for it. Like I think it's in the next movie where Malfoy breaks Harry's nose. And she
Yeah.
actually tells Harry that she kind of likes the way he looks with it broken because it makes him look masculine. And I was like, that's like she's that good a friend that she's even telling him while he's in pain that he still looks handsome. Like that's, like it's a simple thing, but she literally is a walking kind heart.
Yeah. But one of the main pros for this movie is that it really gets into the serious dueling aspect. With them
Oh yeah.
creating Dumbledore's army. We hadn't really seen too much of that. I mean, like sparingly in Chamber and Goblet, but here, I mean, it's like you were saying. They're gathering the troops, and they're basically getting ready for war.
Yeah, the setting the board. Yeah, this movie is one of the reasons why it's probably my favorite. Is I think it gives great character examples in this one. I think just about every character gets a moment where they really shine in one way or another, and you get a real great ensemble in this one. You get a lot of the students in this one too, more as more functional characters. You spend more time with them. Um,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, it's we haven't seen very much in terms of defense. They really go more for the whimsical classes to get and ones that can scare us a little bit. But the defense, obviously, because those that it's usually the professor of that class that turns out to be the one driving the plot. So I think the only time we really got to see it particularly was, I think, like you said, with Lupin teaching them how to fight,
Yeah.
how to overcome what's their great fear, and we saw a little bit of that with Crazy Barty Crouch as Moody, and obviously that goes very very dark very quickly. So we never really got to see it.
Although we did also see Lockhart turn some pixies loose on the class.
That is true. Yeah, I guess he. Although it's a very interesting turn when it turns into the tag team match of him and Harry versus Snape and Malfoy. They should have threw down more in that, in my opinion. The glove should have come
Yeah,
off.
yeah,
But yeah, it's
it was too
great,
quick.
and I think one of the great elements too is that Harry is the one teaching the class. We finally get to see a defense class fully through and through, and it's Harry who's the teacher. So I think that's there's something very fulfilling about that. Um, and I love the relationship between Sirius and Harry. Like I had mentioned with Order and
Yeah,
Phoenix, how that scene where he talks about him possibly living with him, I just thought that was very sweet. And then, of course, their relationship expands in this one, and the moment where he sees Sirius and runs into his arms is so sweet. It breaks my heart because I felt it coming the moment that was such a nice moment. I'm like, okay, well, I know where this is going. He's gone. Because once again, I
yeah,
didn't read the book, so I didn't know he was going to eat it in this one. He's one of my favorite characters. I like how you can tell he's someone who, I mean, he's the cool uncle, so but you know that he was the one who probably got James into trouble when they were younger.
yeah.
You get the idea that he kind of looks like an aging rock star, like the way they dress him. So I feel as though that's why Snape doesn't like him. It's like, ugh, he's that one. He's a wretch, So I like the way they design him too. I know some people had an issue with Gary Oldman's casting because they said that in the book he's younger than him, but I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it's Gary Oldman, so he could have played Luna, and I think he would have been amazing.
And also, I think the idea was that he was sort of prematurely aged by spending 12 years in Azkaban.
This is true. I'd imagine it's pretty rough living in there. So yeah, that might have aged him up a bit. But I love their relationship. There's a little moment towards the end where when they're fighting alongside, he says, "Nice one, James." I liked that
Yeah,
little moment.
yeah,
It's great. He was back as a young man for a second, and of course Harry looks so much like his dad. So you know it has that great moments. I love the abruptness of his death. Like I had mentioned, the weight of the Avada Kedavra. That when it happens, it's a bullet through the heart. It's over. That's it.
yeah,
There is no way around it. It's terrifying. It's it's the golden gun from the golden eye game. You know, one bullet, one shot, you win. And it's so heartbreaking because Harry doesn't even have a chance for like a great dramatic moment of holding him in his arms. He's gone. That's it.
yeah,
He's out. And the I think one of the good editing choices was silencing Daniel's screams. I think that actually made it more effective. The erratic editing, because you're like in his mind for a
yeah.
second, where everything feels just broken and sad and angry. Um, this is just a very well directed movie. I think that Yates manages to capture the mood of each scene when Snape confronts Harry, when they're having the back and forth, where Harry jumps into Snape's brain, into his memories, and just the way it's shot is it's so erratic and just like you're spinning around the room with the two of them, and it really kind of puts you in that hypnotic state. So, I mean, I just think this is a phenomenally directed movie.
Hmm. Yeah, I personally like the first half much better than the second. Like I think after we get the where he's inside the mind of the snake, then I feel like scenes just kind of die off a little too early. Like when like after he's inside of Snape's mind, then yeah, I like how it's executed, but then it doesn't really go anywhere else after that.
It doesn't. No, that there's no payoff for that. The payoff is in Deathly Hallows Part Two, so it's kind of more a nugget
Yeah.
than it is an out and out. Yeah, it's fleeting.
And also the way this is portrayed in the book, chapter at this point is called Snape's worst memory,
Uh-huh.
and you're led to believe then that it's because James is tormenting Snape, but
Yeah.
in the book that there's also a sequence when he yells at Lily and calls her a mudblood.
Ooh.
And based on what happens in Deathly Hallows, you realize, oh, that's not why it's his worst memory.
Uh-huh.
It's because he effectively lost his best friend, basically.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 That makes sense. I think it's the irony because you had mentioned earlier, and you're absolutely correct of them. They, them trimming the fat. Obviously, I haven't read the book, but seeing 800 pages and the basic story on film, I can't imagine that all of it was needed. But I think that even though they may have trimmed the fat of the book, they still could have allowed the scenes that they chose to breathe a little bit more. Because I do
Yeah,
agree, I do think that it does get into that kind of that territory where we're kind of going along at a nice pace telling the story. Then I think pretty much the moment that they get rid of Umbridge, it just kind of explodes and everything just goes really fast. They're like
yeah,
plowing their way through this finale. And when I'm watching it, I love it. It pulls me right in, it pulls me right through. But I do agree they could have allowed the middle section of the movie to breathe a little bit, and they could have expanded on some scenes. And I remember, I do agree, especially because I mean, even like one thing that's a detriment is that, as I was saying, I really enjoy Sirius and Harry's scenes, and I can tell that the scene where they meet at the train station or the bus station, where he turns from wolf form back into human form, it looks like he's wearing like a fur coat or something. He just looks ridiculous. It's so great, and he's talking with Harry, and they have this really nice dialogue, starting to have a dialogue about the previous generation. And just as it gets interesting, it cuts away, and I'm just like, it looked like that scene got gutted. Like it looks like they had more material, they wanted to
mm,
pop along a little bit more. But the thing is, the great thing about the title, Order of the Phoenix, is it's not just about the order that Harry forms, it's that it is a legacy, continuing it from previous generations, and that plays a huge part in this whole story. Um, and seeing how their parents' lives affected them and how it's going to carry out into the finale. But the great thing about it is it is a legacy. So I want to learn more about the previous generation. I feel like they they only touch so much when they talk about the past. Like I don't obviously since I didn't read the books and I don't go too deep into the lore unless it's presented to me in the films. Uh,
Right.
so I have no idea if they've already filled the gaps, but part of me felt that the reason why they left a lot of the previous stories a little bit more vague is so that they could actually show us those stories at some point. Um, and obviously, it looks like they're trying to do that now. But I would have liked a little bit more because they keep during Snape's. I know I'm jumping ahead here, but during Snape's vision in Deathly Hallows Part Two, where he and Dumbledore are talking about the miscommunication as to who the child is supposed to be and all that. I remember being a little lost for a second, and I'm like, I don't remember them going over this whole thing about Voldemort going around killing babies like the plagues, and not and confusing which one he's supposed to. Unless I'm reading this all wrong, it could totally be that way. But regardless, anyway, long story short, they could have added more to Order of the Phoenix to give us more background from that generation because I wanted to learn more about them.
Yeah, because at this point, this was the shortest film.
Oh yeah, yeah,
You know.
yeah. Like I said, they wanted this one to pop along, and it does absolutely.
Now, this is the story where Harry starts. Would you call it dating Cho Chang? I mean,
Yeah, I mean he's crushing on her, she's crushing on him, and he asks her out, and
yeah,
also they kiss in no, they don't kiss in this one. Yeah,
yeah,
they do kiss in this one. He
yeah,
kisses Ginny
yeah.
down the
They're
line.
kissing in the mistletoe, but
Yeah, I also appreciate they give him two girlfriends. Good. I'm glad that good for them, good for him.
yeah. But the way the book portrays it, it actually becomes a little bit toxic
Uh huh.
for various reasons. But on screen, it's much more meet cute. Although the way it ends is like a little bit sloppy, I think.
Oh
Just
yeah, it
yeah,
just kind of it was very cute. They were kind of adding a little bit of relish here and there between the two of them. It seems like it's going somewhere, but I mean, it ends on a downer, and
yeah,
it's like I wish once again letting the movie breathe a little bit. I wish we had a little bit more payoff there because it's like I mean Harry, there's no way he has any hard feelings. He's not like that. So we
no,
know that we know that automatically that this isn't he's not going to complete unless he does. But just to me, it doesn't seem like he was going to hold a grudge. So I think for them, they were just like for it's just visual language for them. It's you see, the kind of thing that's going to separate them, and then so that I guess eases up the next one when he's flirting with Ginny and things change, and he just does the old when Lana Lang becomes Lois Lane, when Gwen Stacy becomes Mary Jane, there's always the switch. So they just kind of did that a little sneakily, right? It's like N shows over here now, but now Ginny is here. Um, so yeah, I think that I agree. It was because it was very sweet, and the two of them had like kind of a very cute little chemistry with each other, and we spent enough time with these characters that I'm like I would like to see, I'd like to see him successful a little bit. He's not dating. He's very, he's always caught up in trying to save the world. So um,
yeah,
I think one of the reasons that this is very high on my, very high, if not number one, definitely number two. Like I say, they switch with this in the next one. But of course, the battle between Dumbledore and Voldemort is. I mean,
oh
I,
yeah,
I live for that. I always love when the old mentor goes after the bad guy, and the two of them have that like Obi-Wan and Darth Vader
yeah,
fight.
exactly.
It's so cool. It's everything you wanted to see. Oh, it's fantastic.
I love that he still calls him Tom. By the way,
Oh man, that was I remember like when that scene happened, I was like, he doesn't care. Everyone else is afraid just to save Voldemort when he's not in the room, but he walks right up to him and says it's foolish for you to come here tonight, Tom. Like he might as well have called him, "Hey, welcome back, little Tommy." Like he might as well have just gone full on and do the go get your shine box to him. Uh, yeah, that's the great thing is when he appears from that like green smoke and flame, and you just see that look on Voldemort's face, like oh shit, because he knows he's in trouble. It's his old headmaster, and he's coming. So just the setup alone, the sheer audacity of calling him Tom, I just love that bit. And then Harry does it a couple of movies later, which I love that it's
Yeah.
him kind of channeling his old mentor by kind of backhanding Voldemort. It's so great.
Hmm. Yeah, there's a lot more to get into. Obviously, Helena Bonham Carter as Bellatrix. I remember the first time I saw her, she freaked me out.
Oh yeah, I love Helena Bonham Carter. This is very much a Helena Bonham Carter part. I wouldn't be surprised if J.K. Rowling said that she based the character on her because, it's funny we talk about how she was introduced in this. When she started having dialogue on screen, I was like, even though she's very much a very new character at this point and very much a unique character, she fits so perfectly into this universe. I honestly felt as though she had already been in the series. That's just how comfortably she slipped in. She's amazing. I like
Yeah,
the fact that she's this kind of crazy like Manson girl, like one
yeah,
who's completely like just obsesses and deifies Voldemort, and she is a true believer. Everyone else just sort of does it out of fear, whereas she and like I said, Barty Crouch Jr. very much are like when they say the Dark Lord, they're referring to him like he is God, and
yeah.
that's one thing you got to give that character is that she is unrelentingly loyal to him.
No, yeah, I wish that other new characters got more screen time, like because Tonks was a popular one, and
Yeah.
throughout this whole film series, he gets maybe about 10 lines, and the one guy Kingsley, he only speaks a couple of times.
Mm.
So yeah, I wish they had built up that adult community more.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I know. I'm very familiar with Tonks's popularity. I remember like finding it very like almost overwhelming. I knew obviously it was from her extended appearances in the books, but because I remember I enjoyed her in these movies, even though she doesn't get a whole lot to do. Um,
Yeah,
but she's like one of those characters like Ahsoka Tano in Star Wars, where it's like I don't know well enough about them to call myself an expert, but I know why they're very wildly popular with fans. And that happens with a lot of series. Is there are a lot of great characters who unfortunately don't get as much screen time or as much to do. Like Faramir becomes very interesting in the Two Towers, but in the films in Return of the King, he really I don't even remember him being in the movie. So it's just unfortunate, but that's sort of the price of film adaptations. Yeah, yeah, they did it more in favor of obviously Bellatrix and Sirius, and also another note. I think that I like how they handled Voldemort in this because
yeah,
after bringing him back in such fashion at the end of Goblet of Fire, I was under the impression that we were going to start seeing a lot of him. But they actually don't do that, and I think that was smart because that's a character we can't spend too much time with because he
yeah,
loses his pastiche and his strength of character. Using him predominantly in haunting visions makes him so much scarier because basically what we're learning is every time Harry closes his eyes, like that's what he's seeing. So I think that they basically handle Voldemort as the face of post-traumatic stress disorder. Because
yeah,
Harry's mood swings and his just everything, like he sees Cedric's face everywhere. He just everything about what happened in that graveyard is clearly still very much in effect. And Daniel Radcliffe plays it so perfectly. His descent into like he's clearly kind of losing his mind. Like when he shouts "Look at me" at Dumbledore, it's very like it's a bit chilling because you're not used to seeing Harry in that type. We've seen him get upset, we've seen him sad, but this is back to that "I'm gonna kill him" Harry Potter, and we're like,
yeah.
oh, that's right, he still has some Voldemort in him, so that's just sort of bleeding out of him at moments.
But yeah, what you were saying about not showing too much of Voldemort, it would kind of be like showing too much of Michael Myers or too much of Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's better to use them tastefully because otherwise you could start to be you can really saturate the character, and you don't want to do that. The fact also, I forget often that he's Ray Fiennes is not in Half Blood
Half
Prince.
Blood Prince.
And once
No.
again, the only time you see Voldemort is in flashbacks to his origins when he's a young man. Um,
Yeah.
and I think, once again, that's even creepier. That he's kind of like Damien from The Omen in Half Blood Prince. And you're like, ugh, like even as a kid, he's a goddamn creep. So once you get to Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2, you're like, he's been perfectly built up as a villain, and you're ready to see the kind of the final square off. And kind of a great thing about him is he gains and loses because when you see that basically he was a greedy kid who obsessed over his powers and wanted to achieve immortality. At the end of the day, he is like every other madman that's ever existed. It just so happens he's incredibly powerful. On top of it, so they did a wonderful job building a character by virtually spending no real character time with Ray Fiennes other than when he is just being as grotesque and evil as he possibly can be. So, yeah, I think that the writing and directing and the performances of everyone who played Voldemort, I think they did a great job as to not, like I said, oversaturate him, overdo him. Like you said, Michael Myers, but I also like the shark in Jaws,
Oh
um,
yeah, yeah,
being almost present purely as a theme and through tension. Yeah, and the Joker in the Dark Knight use you
yeah.
use time to your advantage, and you don't have to overdo it.
One last question, and then we're gonna move on. What do you think of the effects on Grop, who's Hagrid's half brother?
Uh, it's not its best moment. What's it called? It's certainly a step up from the troll from Sorcerer's Stone. It's a few steps up from that.
Yeah,
I always kind of cut a break to some of the more crazy and whimsical ones because they're supposed to be very dorky and kind of, well, not dorky, but they're very supposed to be very um,
innocent.
kind of, yeah, well, yeah, exactly, uh, and so I kind of enjoy the fact that they make him very kind of doofy looking, but it's definitely not their finest moment, but it doesn't pull me out of it too bad.
Yeah. All right. Next up is the Half Blood Prince, and this was actually originally supposed to come out in November of 2008. It was actually done, but then they bumped it back to the following summer, and I think it's because Warner Brothers had just had a huge summer blockbuster with the Dark Knight, so I guess they wanted the same deal in 2009.
Oh yeah, it was just smart. And the thing is, the Harry Potter fans are going to be front and center, and everyone likes Harry Potter. Like even people who don't really follow it can go watch one. So they knew that hey, they were sitting pretty. They had Batman and Harry Potter. They still do, but at that time they had two ongoing series,
Yeah.
and both of them were insanely popular. So yeah, it definitely was that. I don't think there's much other thought. I think The Dark Knight was their hot $1 billion summer movie, and I think they just enjoyed that. Was it a July release?
Yeah, July.
Yeah, they liked that sweet July release. Yeah, because then they were able to do Deathly Hallows Part One. They were able to take some of that great Christmas season money, Thanksgiving season money, and then they got to enjoy their July release again. So yeah, you could tell it was very calculated.
Yeah.
It makes sense. You have only at that point there's only three films left. You want to make sure that they are in the right places to maximize as much profit as you can.
So this movie, I think, much more subdued as far as the tone. It's very much the calm before the storm, where you're just kind of like
Yeah.
gathering information, basically.
Yeah, I remember. I always knew that there was a Harry Potter movie, and honestly, I'm not even sure if I was watching any of the trailers anymore, unless they played before a movie. Like, and not that I didn't like the series. It was just like, well, I know one's going to come out, and I look forward to seeing it. And less I know, the better. So it's been a lot. That was actually one of my favorite bits of really not knowing what the hell I was going to get with each one.
Hmm.
But since this wasn't the last one, the only thing I knew about it was Dumbledore died. That was the only thing I knew about it. Spoilers. Um, that was really the only thing I knew about it, and I was just like, well, this is the last film before the big finale. So sometimes the last one can before the finale can kind of be either dull or just kind of be wasting time until the next one starts. This one is exactly that. It is the calm before the storm. It's pure character, and I remember when I went to the theater knowing virtually nothing or nothing at all, pretty much, when it opens with this push in on Harry and Dumbledore in front of the press, with Harry all battle damaged from Order of the Phoenix, and just this music, and it's just this it's very haunting, and you just see this far and away look in Harry's eyes, like once again his brain is just can barely handle all this, his heart can barely handle it, and then this push in on Dumbledore's hand on Harry's arm.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this movie's gonna friggin' kill me. I'm like, this movie is going to break my heart, because just the same thing with Sirius Black. I'm like, the moment they stress how important someone is to Harry, you call the mortician, but just that opening and then pushing into the Harry Potter title, I was like, this is going to be a very dark film.
Yeah, but we find out a lot about Voldemort's past as Tom Riddle, and how he basically discovered a way to split his soul into seven pieces, basically.
Yeah, a very interesting idea. I mean, obviously, villains and artifacts and MacGuffins are as old as time. Search for immortality is usually the ultimate villain goal for in books and film. Whether they're doing literally or figuratively trying to reach immortality, but despite kind of the classic villain cliches, the fact that she is able to retroactively, because I'm not sure if she planned it that way the whole time, that a lot of the elements that we were pick a lot of the kind of artifacts or MacGuffins throughout the series, I don't know if she ever intended them to actually mean something beyond those movies. But if she did, great. If not, even better, because it's difficult to do sort of a retroactive connection and have it look like it was always planned. And I mean, when they mentioned that, I was like, oh, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. It makes sense why, all those plans were kind of, like very almost flimsy, because it was just one small section of a huge story. Also, I like the fact that seven Horcruxes, seven books, just making that nice and even. And I honestly, like I said, there's something about him in this movie. Played by Frank Delane, Stephen Delane's son.
Hmm.
He was on the Walking Dead spinoff,
Fear the
Fear
Walking
the
Dead?
Walking Dead. Yeah, he's on that show. I don't know if it's still on or not.
Yeah, it's still on.
Yeah, but I found him almost like at his creepiest, and just when Dumbledore meets him at in his the orphanage, and then in that
Yeah.
scene with Slughorn, it's just they like I said, it's that Damien from The Omen. It's just that creepy, like I don't know if there was ever anything human about him, and once again, showing how formidable he is. Classically, with your hero and villain, you want them to be polar opposites, and J.K. Rowling literally down to every detail made these two as opposite as you could possibly be, even down to one of them having hair and one of them being bald. Um, and that's the great thing. He is soulless. He's empty. And of course, that's all brought up in Order of the Phoenix. You're going to lose because you don't know love. You have nothing to fight for, and that's the
Yeah.
great divide between the two. But this movie shows that that's also Harry's weakness. Having love and friends is also going to mean he's going to keep losing them.
Hmm.
So I love the way they have perfectly built up their two main hero and villain. This being sort of that final step, before the final battle.
I was personally more creeped out by Ray Fiennes' nephew. Hero finds Tiffin as the younger Tom Riddle. I never really found him natural when he's a teenager Tom Riddle. I remember in Chamber of Secrets he felt more like an actual character. Like here he just seemed more like a stereotype of a character. I mean that's just the way I always thought of it.
Yeah, he's very snarling. What's it called? Yeah, I was like when I said like younger Tom Riddle tends to creep me out a little bit more. I was actually roping all three of them together because
Hmm.
when you see him fully formed, it's like, well, this is a man that has, if you want to call him a man, is just has very long decades of being delusional and insane. But when you see them
Yeah.
so young, like you even go as far back as as yeah, Ray finds his nephew, which I always liked. It was a great little bit of casting.
Yeah.
There's something so chilling, and then like when he's going through his like, you see, I always kind of looked at it as because he was a Slytherin, he was kind of playing to that slimy, obnoxious, snake-like person.
Mm.
I think like once he grows out of that, that's once you see him more calculated, and that's when I think that's what I would probably consider the one that we meet in Chamber of Secrets is more mature. This is him after he's learned to manipulate the professors and make them, unaware of the kind of person he was. That's when he. I'm pretty sure that's around the time he started to create the name Voldemort. So that's I think that's really the kind of we get kind of a trilogy of him growing up where you get one where he's a little child, one where he's kind of a prepubescent little prick, and then you get him finally when he's like the fully formed mastermind before he writes his Mein Kampf and becomes the supervillain. So yeah, I do agree. Definitely, he's a lot scarier in that first scene. Like, just it makes your skin crawl. It also makes you wonder, like Dumbledore, you should have put him in like a chest and dropped him to the bottom of the ocean. You meet that kid.
Yeah, like I always thought when Harry outright says to him, "Did you know?" Then, and he said, "Did I know? I just met the most dangerous dark wizard of all time." No, I didn't. It's like, how could you not know?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's in denial or if he's somehow at that point. It could be that it plays to his sentimentality that he thinks that possibly he could have guided him in the right direction. So maybe his, I don't want to call him delusions because, you can't hate a guy for trying to be optimistic. But at the same time, considering how powerful Dumbledore is, and at this point, I'm pretty sure at this point he's already had his duel with Grindelwald. Like you figured he would be able to kind of spot the early signs, but once again, maybe it was hubris into thinking that he could probably guide him, but that clearly didn't work out.
Yeah, I think a running motif with the character is that he always tries to see the good in everyone.
Yeah, yeah, he definitely does his best, and ironically, it works to the overall master plan between him and Snape because he knows that Draco just does not. Draco's not a killer. He even tells him that. You're not an
Yeah.
assassin, and counting on that so that spoilers. Snape and Dumbledore kind of set up this so that Dumbledore's death will actually carry a certain weight. It'll give Snape the opportunity to infiltrate. But obviously, at first glance, for someone unaware of this, it is horrifying. But it is, ironically, Dumbledore's belief that there is good in most and that maybe it could come out. He knows that there is some goodness in Draco, despite the fact that he's a little jerk, um, and ends up working in their favor. So yeah, it works in favor for him, and it works against him. You can't blame a guy for wanting to help out the lost, but if I met that kid, I don't know.
I do like that we get to see Malfoy in sort of a different circumstance where he's always been obnoxious. He's always been a bully. Like he's always loved to talk the talk, but now he's got a chance to walk the walk, and he realizes that he doesn't really want any part of it. But he's really doesn't have a choice at this time.
Yeah, and Malfoy not reading the books and not knowing where his arc was going was a lot of fun because immediately, once I started, the first film, you clearly can tell he's obviously going to be that's going to be his academic antagonist, um,
Yeah.
and it's just going to be like, well, this is going to be interesting because the time is going to come where he's either going to embrace just full darkness and become and take a step up and become a true villain where he's actually a real antagonist to Harry instead of just one in a social level. It's either he's going to fully embrace it, or we're going to see that he really was just a spoiled kid who became cruel because he wasn't raised proper. And that's really it at the end of the day. He's one of a million jerks that we've met in our life, and that's really it. But this is his opportunity to show himself off as the Death Eater that he thinks, he can be. And even at the beginning, you can tell, like, he's conflicted, and good for, Tom Felton finally gets something to really do outside of just being a jerk, and I think he does a great job. Because
Yeah.
you can see every minute of him acting cruel in this. It is partly him taking out anger, and it is partly him really hating the situation he's in.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. You see him show up, and he's in like an all black suit. Before coming to back to Hogwarts, he's carrying Lucius's walking stick. It's
Yeah.
just like he seems to think that he's now, inaugurated, and that he is sort of a Death Eater, and he has to start behaving like one. But he's just not up for the task. He can be cruel, but this is a different type of level. He's being asked to murder a man. It's very different. For some people, that's a bit of a leap. And he handles it very well. You can the scene where he's the big scene in the bell tower where when he's like, I have to do this, I have to kill you or he's going to kill me. Tom Felton acts the hell out of that moment.
Yeah. Definitely.
The way his voice breaks and trembles when he says, or he's going to kill me, and just goes so high, and it's just like, oh my god, like, you hate him throughout the movies, but you genuinely are just like, oh, this is the worst situation that he could possibly be in. So yeah, that's one of I think that's also one of the sections I really like about this is when you watch it, having the foreknowledge of what happens in the future. Snape and Malfoy, the ones who have been the jerks, metaphorically, well, literally as well for the last few movies, they're both in the worst situations they could possibly be in because they're both agents on either side, and they're being told everyone thinks you're an asshole, so just continue to do that, and then be our inside man, and basically have to be the opposite of who you are. Snape has to be evil. Draco has to be evil, even though deep down they're not. They're not bad people. So it makes this movie so much more tragic when you've been kind of waiting to see the comeuppance for Snape and Draco if you're unfamiliar with the way the story goes. And then once they kind of get it, you really feel bad for them. You're like, oh God, they're in the worst situation.
Now, as is customary, we have our new professor, Slughorn, who's played very well by Jim Broadbent. Not Defense Against the Dark Arts. He's
Finally,
he's in Snape's old role as the potions master. And something that gets brought up a lot is that he's shown as the former head of Slytherin House, and people like to say, "Oh, he's such a nice guy. He's got none of the Slytherin traits." Sure, he does. He's we've seen him. He's
overly ambitious.
yeah, and he's cunning. He's just cunning for good reasons. Like we
Yeah,
see him like
he's a good
um,
liar.
yeah, yeah. He likes to play favorites with the students, and because they'll pay him back later in life, basically. But
Yeah,
he's certainly pleasant.
yeah. Well, you see, and that's the thing that really goes into it. I don't think they don't really outwardly state it, but you meet all these characters, and they are from different houses, and they're not all just one personality. It's like if you're from Slytherin, that doesn't mean you're a jerk. It just means that you fit into one of the like 6 or 7 qualifications, personality wise. But not all of them are evil. Like being cunning and ambitious and maybe overly forthright doesn't mean you're a complete. Doesn't mean you're a bastard or anything. And Slughorn, yeah, absolutely. It's like just because he's very sweet and kindly and quirky and funny, it doesn't mean that he's. I mean he's kind of a bit rude too, like the way he's like very nice to Hermione and Harry, and just looks at Ron and goes, "Good to see you, Weasley." You know what I mean? Where
Oh,
he's
oh, well,
like
he
he.
doesn't even call him Weasley. He calls him
Oh, that's
Wallenby.
right. That's right. Wallenby. Yeah, even worse. He doesn't even think to learn this guy's name. He is forgetful, sure, but he's basically saying, "I wouldn't be forgetful of you if I didn't want to be." You know what I mean? He just, because it's just it doesn't register to him. But that goes back to the ideas. There are lots of people who go through these schools. So if you're Gryffindor, it doesn't mean you're a hero, and if you're from Hufflepuff, it doesn't mean you're maybe an eccentric or a weirdo, and if you're from Slytherin, you're not an evil, Death Eater. Yeah, so I like that it explores that. They're not always. And another thing we learn is obviously Snape and Draco are bullies for a reason, because Snape was bullied, and treated horribly by James and Sirius. But Snape is not innocent, but he was being tormented in some way because he was considered a weirdo, and Draco wasn't being bullied, but he was being raised horribly by Lucius. I can't even imagine what it's like having a guy like that as a father. So in one way or another, everybody stems from something, and that's once again the great thing about it is, this movie shows you Draco, Snape, and Voldemort in very interesting ways. And what we learn from the three of them is that Snape and Draco really aren't that bad, but Voldemort really is that bad. I mean, he is just
Yeah.
rotten to the core. So, like I said, I love when the movies stop the action a bit and focus a lot on character and theme like that.
You're saying about the action, like in this story, there really isn't that much of it. I mean,
No.
especially not in the a book. They actually invented a couple of scenes, like the collapsing bridge is only mentioned in the book, but I love that's one of the scenes that we open on, and that there's another scene at the burrow when it's being attacked, and obviously in my opinion, one of the coolest looking scenes of the movie is in the cave when they're attacked by
Oh.
these. It's basically like we're watching the Walking Dead at that point. It's they're not called zombies that they're attacked by. They're called inferi.
Ooh. It even sounds icky. Yeah, this scene is. I like dread this scene. Not because I don't like it. I think you're right. I think it's one of the most impressive scenes in the movies. In the movie, actually, yeah, in the whole series. But it's just the design of those things. My skin crawls just thinking about them. And what's worse is when you see just the ocean, literally the ocean filled with them, and just you see their little arms, and oh god, I'm getting creeped out thinking about it. That scene was so well directed and well acted, and everything about that scene is so unsettling. I remember watching it in the movie theater, and I think I was sitting in the same row I was sitting in when I saw Sorcerer's Stone, and I'm just thinking about like all the cheery, fun, sweet scenes in that, and then thinking about Harry having to force this liquid down Dumbledore's throat, and Dumbledore screaming and crying in the worst possible way. It's like watching like your grandfather getting pinned down to take his medication, and on top of
Yeah.
it, there are these creepy, evil little pygmies that are, trying to consume you. That is one of the most, if not the most horrific scene in this series.
Just the way he tells Harry, that this potion might paralyze me, it might make me forget who I am, and might cause me so much pain that I beg for relief. Do not indulge any of these wishes. You must make sure that I keep drinking, even if you have to force it down my throat.
It's awful. Like just setting that up, and you just see in Harry's face. But he is so loyal to him that he's going to do whatever he says. Like, every time he says it several times in this movie, but he would be like Harry would be like, "Oh, I don't know, but it's Dumbledore," and he says that a lot. That's his excuse for everything. It's Dumbledore, basically saying if he asks me to do something, I'm going to do it. And so like he
Yeah.
does follow through with that, and it is just. I mean, everything that he said, everything he built up when he's saying, it's going to cause me the worst pain, and you can't, you know. you can't help me. You have to keep going. It plays out exactly as he described, if not worse. Um, but also, I think that if Order of the Phoenix didn't do it already, this movie just solidifies one of the reasons I really love Michael Gambon as Dumbledore is because he's like a bad motherfucker. Like when the pygmies are like going after everybody, and it just cuts back to him, and you just see him whirling that fiery tornado, like wiping everything out. I was like, man, because they have been calling him a great wizard. Even Snape gets very defensive of him at the beginning when Bellatrix kind of sneers at Dumbledore being considered a great wizard, and Snape is like, he is a
Yeah.
great wizard, and you see it in full form. Like, what the hell? And that's a great thing. That I'm glad that they did that because they're going to kill him virtually in the next scene. So allowing us to see, this incredible feat of power really, really gives us a nice closure for the character, or feeds into the closure.
One other identity that this movie has is all the relationships that pop up. I mean, we mentioned Harry. He was with Cho Chang in Order, and now he's with Ginny. And I'm sure a lot of people agree with me. In these movies, Harry and Ginny have no chemistry.
Yeah, I'm not exactly in love with their relationship. I feel like towards the end, it was just they needed to give um, Harry a final love interest, and I think they loved the idea of Harry literally becoming a family member. Even though, I mean, I don't think it was necessary. The Weasleys adopted Harry the moment they met him, so. But I get what they wanted to do. There's something very sweet about him being with his best friend's sister, but it's like he met the first movie. You see the two of them, and he's like 13, and she's like 5 or 6 or something. No, she's a little older. She has to
Well,
be older than that because she's in school with him at the same time. But she looks so much younger.
yeah, I think it's only like a year or two difference
Really,
between them.
that's it. My God, they look like an eternity between them in that first movie. But regardless, they set up very small thing that she has a crush on him. He just
Oh
sort of
yeah, yeah.
awkwardly
I mean,
smiles back at her, and you see in certain scenes that she's being very tense around him. But that's really it. And then this kind of comes out of nowhere. It's like, well, I know she's had a crush on him, but when did
yeah.
he start kind of reciprocating? I mean, it could be as simple as, one day, suddenly he saw her differently. Because that happens. You grow up, somebody, and
Yeah,
then they,
sometimes.
I don't want to sound creepy, but then they mature, and then he's known her as the little sister of his best friend, but now she's a young woman. So, obviously,
Hmm.
so there is sort of a, you can just justify it in your head, but it would have been nice if maybe they kind of tried a little bit harder in the previous movies because they knew that they were going to go this way.
Yeah, it's just that Ginny as a character was always like extremely underdeveloped in these movies. I mean, she was much more fleshed out in the books, and the way they built up the relationship is much better, obviously.
Yeah, it's a bit extraneous. She's a bit of an extraneous character in the series. Like, she fades into the background like most extras. Well, not extras, but no, I guess you can say extras. Um, she's just not in it very much, so it doesn't really feel earned. I think that either fans of the books will probably enjoy it because they've actually spent time with these characters in a different medium. People who haven't read the books and are unfamiliar with any sort of build up over time will just kind of be happy that Harry's getting, he gets a romance because obviously the main romance of this series is Ron and Hermione. I think most people kind of saw that
Yeah.
coming. I'll tell you right from the start. In that, I once again didn't read the books, knew nothing about them. From the start, I figured that it was going to be Ron and Hermione having the romance because right from the start,
Hmm.
you're like, this is already like a Hepburn and Tracy relationship where she constantly thinks he's a moron, and you can tell he likes her, but he's acting like a typical boy about it, and they just keep making that more and more and more. And the more agitated she gets with him, the more I can tell throughout the movies that she's the two of them are going to end up stuck with each other. So, and that I always expected them. There was just something about Harry and Hermione that always felt like a brother and sister. There's clearly, I'm sure there was an attraction at some point. There's no way when Harry Met Sally put it perfectly. There's no way that there wasn't an attraction at some point, and we see a glimmer of that maybe in Deathly Hallows Part One. But I always liked that the
Yeah,
dynamic between the three of them was that Ron and Hermione were the romance. And Harry was kind of the loner, kind of like Luke Han and Leia. Luke had to focus more on the one specific
right.
journey, whereas the two of them were kind of intertwined in theirs. So they at least had the chemistry. I feel as though they felt like, well, Harry has to have a some sort of romance at some point, and I think that they just thought it was going to be cute. But yeah, I don't really mind the fact that there's not really a whole lot of chemistry because they don't really have a whole lot of scenes together. So I guess I don't have enough time to pick up on them not having chemistry.
Yeah, I just kind of wish they would have built up more of the fact that Harry, he gets with her because he's really happy with her. And here, it just feels like they get together because the script says they have to get together. I mean, literally, he just sees Ginny through a window, and suddenly, he sees her in that way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's very throwaway. It's just something that they kind of rush through so that they can do it, and I think it just predominantly has to do with it's in the book, so they gotta do it, and because it's a movie and you want your hero to kiss the girl in the end, even though they don't do that. Well, he does kiss her in this movie, but it's not like their romance has a wonderful payoff at the end. You just see in the future that they're married. That's it.
Hmm.
But we didn't see the romance. We didn't see what built towards the marriage.
Um, Another character that I thought really got shortchanged, not just in this one, but in Deathly Hallows 2, is Hagrid. It just feels like with these last few movies, they almost never knew where to put him in there. Like in this movie, I think he's only in two scenes, or at least he
Yeah,
always
I
is in
think
two scenes.
yeah, it's interesting because when the first two movies, Hagrid was extremely prominent. And Order of the
Yeah,
Phoenix, he has some nice moments too. Particularly with the hippogriff and everything like that.
I mean, with that story, it made sense because like
Yeah,
in the first half of the story, he's off
yeah,
doing something
exactly.
else.
Hagrid's always lovable because he's the loyal character, so you know that no matter what, he's always on their side. He's always helping out Dumbledore, and he's always a part of it. But yeah, during the latter movies, he really, really kind of fades into the background. I don't know. I guess it's because I honestly don't even know the geography of it. Like, I'm not even sure when if he even leaves the premises, or if he's at Hogwarts very much until the end, if he's always at his home, or if at some point he skedaddles. I keep forgetting. Um, Really, the only big moment that I really remember him in some of the latter movies is, and it's just so simple. It's him carrying what he thinks is Harry's dead body, which is like the saddest thing ever.
Right.
Because the movies open up
Yeah.
literally with like Hagrid showing up with him with Harry as a baby, and now he's carrying his dead corpse. Like it is some dark shit.
That was the reason that J.K. Rowling left him alive because she always had that visual in mind of him carrying Harry's body
Yeah,
back to
yeah,
Hogwarts.
definitely. It's a very, very powerful image. Yeah, J.K. Rowling definitely likes to do that visual poetry that George Lucas always talks about, where it's just seeing a kind of a payoff in a way that it's paralleled, so that it shows that there is unfortunate kinds of repetition in life, or unfortunate types of you know parallels in life. This particularly being a very, very cruel one, and they do that a lot in the series. There's a lot of iconography that's mirrored throughout the series. But yeah, Hagrid unfortunately gets shortchanged. I mean, the only scene I remember him in this movie obviously is the scene where after Harry takes the liquid luck, and he gets, and the best way to do it is him and
Yeah.
Hagrid get Slughorn drunk so they could ring in for. I like that they
Yeah.
go old school with that. They're just like, what, enough. We don't have to do any spells. Let's just get the guy drunk and have him spill his guts. So I appreciated that.
Yeah. And I do like the fact that taking the luck potion almost makes Harry act
Yeah,
drunk in a way.
that is perfect because obviously alcohol is often referred to as liquid courage. So I like the idea that they basically just did the same thing. It's just in a vial. He is hysterical when he's on that, and it gives Daniel Radcliffe a chance to be funny because his comedic parts in the series is predominantly him falling on his ass. Basically, him making a fool out of himself is usually the funny part. Whereas this, when Slughorn's like Harry, and he goes, "Sir,"
Sir.
yeah, it's hysterical, and he gets to act a little bit drunk, which is a nice little addition. And I love the whole bit after they bury Aragog, and afterwards Slughorn is telling his drunken story about him losing a pet. And I just love the fact that like the two of them are having like a guy talk about getting upset about losing pets. It's
Yeah.
when the movies stop to just to have this part of this half of the films especially needs those moments where the people stop and are just people for a minute, and that's kind of what this movie is too. It's a lot of people talking in rooms in this movie. You know what I mean? There's a
Yeah.
lot of talking, and I don't have a problem with that because it's important stuff and it's done tastefully. But you know, but there's still a lot of great humor in this too. Ron having kind of a fatal attraction subplot with that girl who kind of looks like Alex Forrest from Fatal Attraction. Like that's funny.
A little
Like
bit.
that was funny stuff.
And Harry almost has his own fatal attraction with that one girl who tries to slip him a love potion.
Yeah. Oh my. Yeah. The girls are crazy in this one. They're all everyone's in the heightened state. They were basically. I'm pretty sure they'd be in high school at this point in their lives. So
Yeah.
you still get that holdover from Goblet of Fire where there's still going to be plenty of teen drama. It's obviously just evolved to high school level from middle school level. So, Ron's having trouble with girls, and that's making Hermione jealous. And Harry's got this girl trying to slip him the love potion, and it's boys are still going to be dealing with girls, and girls are still going to be dealing with boys, even if there is a Dark Lord trying to penetrate the walls of the school.
Yeah. I mean, life always goes on in these kind of stories.
Yeah, yeah. Slughorn even says that's life, I suppose. Uh, and I love Jim. I didn't mention I love Jim Broadbent in this movie. I absolutely
Yeah.
adore him. I'm glad that he's a potions teacher for the love of God, giving us a new teacher that isn't Defense Against the Dark Arts. And he's wonderful because you could tell that he's withholding information. Dumbledore even flat out says like, oh, I know he's lying to me, but it's really just a matter of figuring out a way to get it out of him. So like I like the little game that Dumbledore's like I know I'm not just going to be able to get it out of him, so it's very tactical. I do like how Dumbledore and Harry in this are like M and James Bond, where it's like Dumbledore sends him on these little missions and has him do recon and like some espionage stuff, and so I enjoy the fact that this is the one where it's really Harry and Dumbledore that are the most prominent
Yeah.
in this one.
Yeah.